Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to your first video of this tutorial series on building a to-do app using Axum and askama template engine. In this tutorial, we're going to implement sign up a new user and error handling, which is very important. Since we will be interacting with database, so let's go ahead and create a module for that and let's call it data. Now inside the src folder, create that module and also add a user submodule. So add public mod user and now add user.rs file. In this file, we're gonna write some functions to interact with the users table. So create a public async function, call it create user. This function will insert a new user to users table. To insert something to the database, this function needs to access Postgres connection pool. So add an argument, let's call it pool, and which will be of type reference pg pool. Now we have to import pg pool from SQLX, so import that. Then it will take email, which will be of type reference string, and then password, which will also be of type reference string. At this moment, this password is plain text, meaning this is what the user typed in the form. And we don't want to store password in plain text. If our database ever get compromised, then they can obtain email and password, and then they can use it to authenticate. So we want to hash our password. Therefore, if our database ever get compromised, they will have hashed password and they can't use it to authenticate. So in this tutorial, we're gonna be using Bcrypt hashing algorithm, but it's recommended to use Argon 2 algorithm. So when you build your production app, make sure to use Argon 2. So open cargo.toml file, then add Bcrypt, then close that file. Now create a variable, let's call it hashed password. Then call hash from Bcrypt. And this will take our password and the cost, which we can get from Bcrypt, which is default cost. Now this returns a result type, so we have to call unwrap. Now this is a string type, but in our database we are storing password in byte slice. So we need to convert this string to byte slice. So now let's go ahead and create a variable, let's call it byte hash. And then call as bytes on hash password, and this will convert our string type to byte slice. And now we are finally ready to insert our password to database. So let's go ahead and write our first insert query. I'm gonna copy and paste the query, and it's a very simple query. Anyway, this statement will insert to users table and it will add email and password hash, which we name in our schema. You can see the email and password hash, and we won't update the ID because it will be created automatically and auto-incremented. Then the values, we could have passed the values here. Instead, we will use parameter to prevent SQL injection. And now let's go ahead and run our query. So call query function from SQLX. Make sure you call the query, not the query macro. Now pass the query which we wrote, and then we wanna bind the variables. So the first variable will be email, which will be for the $1, and the second variable we bind is the byte slice hash password. And finally, we will execute and pass our connection pool. So pass the pool, and then we have to await. Now this returns a result. Let me go ahead and store in a variable so you can see. And you can see that the return type is a result type. So far you saw we use unwrap to ignore the error, or we use expect to panic with a failure message. Now we could use a match statement to pattern match, and then we can extract the OK and result cases, just like we did inside the auth handler. But we don't wanna deal with the error. Instead, we want to return the error and the caller will deal with the error. In Rust, we can use a question mark to early return the error. So if the result type do return an error instead of OK, we can stop executing the rest of the function and return. If we just add a question mark after the await, and you can see the type is changed from result to query result, which is the OK type. And we can also do this when we call hash function from bcrypt. Instead of calling unwrap, we can add a question mark, and now the caller will deal with the error if we want. Therefore, we can handle the error from one single place. And now it's complaining because we have to return a result type. So let's go ahead and do that. So return result, and the OK type will be init type because we don't want to return anything from this function. And the error type will be, which I'm going to copy and paste then explain. So this will be our error type. In Rust, all custom error types implements error thread from std error. The hashing function from bcrypt returns bcrypt error, and the query function returns SQLX error. And since both of them implemented error thread, they are both now error type, and both of them can return error. But the compiler doesn't know the concrete return type. So you have to use dynamic dispatch. You have to prefix the thread with dyn or dyn keyword, and that lets us use this thread type as a return type. And now, since we don't know the concrete type of the returned error, so we don't know the size of our returned object, so we have to put that in heap using box smart pointer. And now it's complaining because we have to return the OK variant. So return OK at the end. And don't return any value, just leave it empty parentheses. And also remove this variable. We don't need to store the return value from the SQL query. Now we use SQLX query function to query, but there is a macro which we can also use to make query. Use the second one. You can see the bang symbol at the end. Now copy and paste this SQL query statement. And now it's complaining because we have to pass the email and password parameter. So go ahead and pass email and the password, which is hashed and byte sliced, and after that call execute and then pass the connection pool. Then await and then question mark because we wanna return the error. Now the question is which one you wanna use. When you use query macro, it uses the database URL, and look at the table, it gives you compile time error. We must create the relation before we make query. We have to run our migration first, which we did when we set up database connection, and use SQLX query function when your query have dynamic query or you don't need runtime checking and the compiler gives you error but you know it's a correct query. Now throughout this series I'm going to use query macro. So I'm going to comment out so you can get it from the source code, which is linked in the video description. So alright, so now go back to auth.rs file. First import user from data module. After we validate our user, we can insert the new user to users table. So inside the OK block, we can call create user. We can certainly pass email and password from user prom, but we don't have any access to the connection pool. So how we are going to provide the database connection? Well, we use Axum's with state extension, then that will let us provide state within a route, and it's global within that route. Then we can access that state from handler function. Now create a new submodule inside models, so call it app and add that to mod.rs file. So first import pgpool from SQLX, then create a struct, call it app state and derived it from clone macro, and create a public field, call it connection pool, which is of type pgpool. We will use this struct to provide state to our routers. Now go to main.rs file. First import app submodule from models and also import app state. And now when we are setting up the database connection, it returns a pgpool. So we can store it in a variable. Now create app state object by instantiating app state. This struct takes connection pool, so pass pgpool to connection pool. Now we will pass our app state to router. And this will complain because router doesn't take any argument. So go to router function. Now first import app state from models. Add app state argument to router function which is of type app state. Now after all routes, but before tracing layer, add with states extension and pass the app state. Now we can go to auth.rs file. So at the top we first have to import the state extractor. So import from Axum extract. Now add the state extractor. Make sure you add it before form extractor and destructure it and call it app state, and which will be of type state and generic type app state, which we have to import. So let's go ahead and import that quickly. So add the curly braces and import from models. And now provide the connection pool from app state. And we have to add a wait because this is an asynchronous function. For now call unwrap, but we will handle error and show you how to send response. Then we can redirect to login page. Call it into response. Now don't add any semicolon because we have to return this redirect response. Now go ahead and run our server. Now go to the browser and go to localhost 8000. Now go to sign up page. Add a valid username and password. Submit. And we are redirected to login page. Now if we go to the terminal and use PostgreSQL tool to check our database, and you can see one user has been created with that email we provided. Go back to the browser and go to sign up again, and then use the same email address to create another account. Now our server crashed with a panic message, and if we read the log we can see that it says duplicate key value violates unique constraint, and the constraint is user's email key. If you remember when we wrote our migration schema, we set the email to be unique. We basically added a constraint on that column. Postgres will create index for that constraint. If we go back to our terminal, if we check the users table, and we can see there are two indexes, one for primary key ID and another for email constraint. So what we have to do is check if there is a constraint key error with name user's email key when we insert a new user to the users table. Therefore, we can detect if the user submitted duplicate email entry, and then we can show them error message like this email address is already used. So let's go ahead and fix that. So open users.rs file. After await, add map error function. We will map all SQLX error. Now this function takes a closure. Inside this closure, we get access to SQLX error. Now we are going to use match on this error. If I select this variable and then press command dot, or you can click this light bulb, you can see, then VS Code generates all arms. These are all types of SQLX errors we can deal with. But at this moment we don't care about them. I just wanted to show you. The only error we care about is database error. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of them. Leave the default arm, don't delete it. If the error is not database error, then the default arm will be used. Now we get access to database error, obviously. From inside this block, we have to return our own error type. Now we could create our own error type, but there is a crate that lets us convert any error type to our own error type. So go to cargo.toml file, then add this error, this then without any space error, and close that file. Now add a submodule, so go to mod.rs and then create a public mod and call it errors. And go ahead and create errors.rs file. Inside this file, first import error from this error, then create a public enum and call it data error. You can name it anything you want. Derive this enum from error macro, which we imported from this error, and also debug macro. Now I recommend you to go ahead and read the documentation. It's a fantastic documentation. It's not just about this error, it's also about other creds. So you will learn so many things. Now I'm not gonna able to cover every single thing. Now inside this enum, we will add our first data error variant, and let's call it query. Now we will convert any SQLX error to query error. Therefore, we have to add SQLX error type as associated type. So we can't just simply add that type. Instead, we have to use a macro, which is from this error, add from, and then our type, which is SQLX error. This from macro will automatically convert SQLX error to query error. Next, we have to add an error message to our query error. So we will have a message when we do get query data error. To do that, we have to use a macro, which is again from this error. So add error, and inside that we're gonna add our message, and then a placeholder for the error message that will be passed from SQLX error. Now open users.rs file. Then first import data error. Now inside this match statement, we have two arms. The first is the SQLX database error, and the second is default arm, which is for any other SQLX error except database error. So we can add a variable which is of type SQLX error, and we can pass this to our query data error. Pass E. Now it's complaining because we have to return data error from this block. Inside this block, we can add the if statement and then e.constraint, because we want to check the constraint key for unique email, if you remember. Since constraints returns option type, so we have to wrap in some, and inside that we can add our constraint key, which is user's email key, and then open and close curly braces. Now we can't return query data error because it takes SQLX error. So we have to create another error type. So go to errors.rs file. Now add another type. Now I'm going to copy and paste and explain. Add a semicolon. Okay, so we will call this variant is failed query, and it will take string. And the error message will be failed to query, and again this placeholder will be replaced by this string we passed. Now go to users.rs file. Then from here we can return failed query and return this string. This email address is already used. Now from inside else block, we have to return another data error. Now we don't want to return failed query because failed query will be sent to client, and we also don't want to use the query error because this takes SQLX error. Inside this block, we get access to the error which is of type SQLX database error. So we have to create another error type. So go to errors.rs, and again I'm going to copy and paste the variant, and let's call this variant internal, and you can name anything you want. And this will take a string, and this will be the error message, and this will be the placeholder for this string we passed. Go back to users.rs file and then return data error. And then now we can call internal and then pass E, and we have to call toString, and don't add any semicolon. Now I made a mistake. I added a equal sign. It will be double equal. The error should go away. And finally we have to update the return type. Now you see this is not complaining because all error types are box.dyn std error. So go ahead and remove that and return data error. Now bcrypt hash function is complaining because it returns bcrypt error. That error type is not data error. So go to errors.rs, then add another variant, let's call it bcrypt, and which is from bcrypt error, and everything is same as before. Now go back to users.rs and you see the error goes away. The reason we added a new variant, we could add the internal data error. Then again we have to use map error function or match statement to extract the error. So it's better for us to just add the variant. And with that we have a solid error handling, so long we are returning data error. Now just like we created a error submodule inside data layer or module, wherever you wanna call, you also wanna create another errors submodule inside handlers, and that will be responsible for handling error inside handlers layer or module. Let's go ahead and create that quickly. And now close all other files because we don't need any of them. Now inside this file, import this error and then data error from data module. Then create an enum, let's call it app error, and again we will derive from error and debug. Inside this error, add our first variant and let's call it database, and which will be from data error. Then add another variant and let's call it template, and which will be from askama error. If you notice, none of them has any placeholder for the error that passed to this variant. Since app error is a top level error, so we will convert each variant to a string and get the underlying error. Now go to auth submodule. First import app error. Now let's update each function's return type one by one. So let's start with signup handler, and instead of returning response, let's return a result. The OK type will be response and the error type will be app error. Now remove this unwrap and add a question mark, and this will propagate the error. This renderer function returns askama error. And finally we have to return OK response. So go ahead and wrap this response in OK. Then update post signup handler. So first update the return type, so we can just copy and paste from signup handler. And then get rid of all this unwrap. Remove the unwrap when we are rendering this template. And add a question mark. Now wrap this response in OK variant. And also update this redirect, so wrap in OK. Then remove this unwrap when we create a new user. When we create a new user, let's store this return type in a variable, let's call it result. Now we don't care about the OK variant because it's a unit type. We care about the error variant, which is data error. Now we can use a if-less statement to check if the result has any error. And inside this curly braces we get access to data error. Now we have to import data error, so at the top go ahead and import data error. Now we already know that if the data error variant is failed query, then we will send that error to the client. So we can add the if-let statement to check that. Now we will log the error. We don't have any mechanism to send the error to the client. We need session to do that. In the next video we will do that. And after that, return redirect response. Make sure you add explicit return. Redirect to sign up again because it's a client-side error. Now if the data error is not failed query error, then we don't want to send this to client. So add the else block to deal with that. Inside this else block, we want to return the error. So just like we wrap in OK when the return type is OK or not error, we will now wrap in ERR or error and pass the error. In our case, we will pass this variable. And add a question at the end, and that will propagate this error to app error. Now go to next function, update the return type and update the response. So I'm not going to explain everything, I'm going to speed this up process. We have to update each functions in public.rs and todos.rs, and all are same. Just update the return type to result and wrap the response in OK. If you go to routes.rs file and see, it's complaining. The reason because we have to return response from handler function. At this moment we are returning a result and which has a response type when it's okay, but we also have a error type and our error type is not a response type. So let's go ahead and convert our error type to response type. So go to errors.rs, which is inside handlers module or folder. Now first add some imports. Add these imports, which I'm not gonna go over because you should already be familiar with them. Then import templates for models. Now if you remember that I told you that to convert any type to response type, we have to implement a trait called into response. So let's go ahead and do that, which is into response for app error, this enum. Now this trait requires to override into response function, which takes self, which is app error, so we can call into response on app error object, and it returns Axum response. Now inside this function we will match on self. Then we can get access to all these error variants. So we can use command dot or this yellow bulb and then fill match arms, and you can see it's filled them. So inside the database error we get access to data error, which is from data module if you remember. And from template we get access to askama template error. Now we have to return response from both of these variant. So let's go ahead and create a function to deal with that. Both of them will be same. So create a function and call it server error, which will take a string. It will return a tuple of status code and response body. Inside this function, first thing we will do, we will add the error log. And after that, we need to render 500 internal server error. Remember, we created a server error.html file for that. Go to templates.rs file. Now go ahead and add the struct for server error.html file. There is nothing new to explain, so I just copied and pasted that. Anyway, then go back to errors.rs file. So first create the HTML string from that template which we want to render, and then call render. Now the render returns a error which is of type askama error. We can call unwrap. Now it's okay to sometimes call unwrap in Rust when you know that it won't fail. If you do not want to do that, instead you can add this logic, which is basically match on this. Let me just first remove this unwrap, otherwise it will complain. So basically match on the result of HTML string, and then we will return a tuple of internal server error status code and HTML response. And when it is error, we will log and a string slice, or you can do anything you want. It's totally up to you. I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna comment out. You can get this from source code, which is linked in the video description. So I'm gonna call unwrap and then return a tuple response of status code internal server error and the HTML response. So go ahead and do that. Now let's go back up, and now at the end of the match statement I added a semicolon, which I forgot to record, so please add that semicolon. From inside the database error we can now call server error function and then pass the data error and call toString to convert it to string. And we can also do that for template error. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that. Now from this function we are returning a tuple of status code and response body, so we can store that returned value. Let's store in a variable. We can also destructure this. Now after this match statement we can then return the tuple and then call into response to convert it to response. Now I made a mistake here. The return type should be response body, and with that we can see our routes.rs is not showing any error. So let's go ahead and run our server. Then go to the browser, then go to sign up page. Try to sign up using same email. Then you can see we are redirected to sign up page. And if we go back to our server, you can see that we get the error log. Now go to users.rs file. Now comment out the query and the OK return. I'm going to deliberately add the error to replicate the internal server error. Now you don't have to do that if you don't want, but I just wanted to show you. Now once it's rebuilt, let's go to our browser and try to add with any email and password. It doesn't matter because it will return an error. So sign up, and you can see we get internal server errors. If we go back to our server and check the log, then we can see that we get our internal server error, and the error is test error which we added, and you can also see the request failed. Now I'm going to comment out this error and uncomment our SQLX query and the OK return. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Don't forget to watch the next one. If you like this video, then give me a like, and if you have any question, then let me know, and I will see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.